So, The Host. This is a film adaptation of a book that was written by Stephenie Meyer, who obviously wrote the Twilight Saga, which is very, very popular, both among those who love to love it and those who love to hate it. I've never really felt that the issue of Twilight has been worth that much attention on either side, so I've kind of tried to stay out of it. But it seems, regardless, that despite putting her name so prominently in the trailers for this film, that name recognition really didn't do this film any favors at all. It did not get people into the theater. I think there was probably a strategy there to where they thought they were going to get the Twilight audience into the theater to see this film. It turns out that didn't happen. This film had a very quiet, not very good opening weekend. I mean, I think the last I looked, they broke 11 million, which is not terribly good. They, in fact, lost to the new G.I. Joe movie, which I didn't even know there was a new G.I. Joe movie. So, the film is not doing well. But as I sat there watching it, it started to make me think about adaptations of books. Because I haven't read this. I wasn't even aware that this book existed until I saw the trailers for the movie. And it seemed to me like it had a really good premise, and it seemed to me like it should have had everything going for it. And whenever I see something that was adapted from a book that I have not read, and I didn't like the movie, I always think to myself, would this have been better as a book? Is it possible that the book was really, really good, and they just couldn't pull it off in movie form? Or vice versa, if I see a film adaptation that was really good, I think, wow, was the book actually better than this? Maybe I should check that out. Because doing an adaptation of a book into the film medium is very difficult. Books are not designed to be seen in a film the way you watch a film. And so you do have to make cuts, you do have to make some changes to the story, and sometimes you end up having to tell the story a very different way. When I saw The Hunger Games, I had never read that book. And watching the film, which I thought was very good, it made me want to read the book series. I have now come very close to finishing the first book. And if I had read that book before I heard about the movie, I would have said it would have been impossible to make a movie based on that book. There is a kind of perspective that you get from Katniss telling you about her experience in the first person and gaining that level of insight of having this come directly from the character herself that you just can't do in a film unless you make it constantly narrated, which I think would have been disastrous for that film. So for as good as The Hunger Games was, it wasn't perfect, not nearly as good as the book, but I do think that they did the best job that they could of adapting the book. It's the same with the Harry Potter series, same with Lord of the Rings. These are very good film representations of the books. They're just not as good because, in truth, in that medium, they can't be. The reason I'm going through all of this long-windedness about adaptations is because I thought this movie truly, truly sucked. And I saw it with my girlfriend. And she didn't particularly care for the film either, but she did tell me that it was not a very good representation of the book. The book goes into more detail. The book is better at explaining a lot of these things, and it fleshes a lot of these things out better than the film did. And before she and I saw the film, I remember her telling me, because she had been reading the book, she wanted to read it before we saw the film, she told me that there was a character who was inhabited by an alien, but that human character who was inhabited by the alien is still conscious in there, and the two of them talk to each other. And I thought, how are they going to do that in a movie? Are they actually going to have this person talking to the alien in her head the whole time? That's going to be really nerve-wracking. And it really, really was, because they actually do that in the film, and it actually gets a little exasperating after a while. I mean, it's so much conversation inside one person, and it just gets very strenuous. Not nearly the biggest problem with the film, but it is one of those things where I thought maybe this was just not a very good book to adapt into a film. But the biggest problem of all when it comes to The Host is the fact that I really did think this was going to be a fascinating premise. There are aliens who come to Earth and inhabit our bodies and make us live a certain way, even though actually I couldn't really figure out if they're making us live a certain way or if they're just living as us. Never really fleshed out their motivations all that much, but I just thought that idea of having an entity living inside of you and having to combat that or having to resist that might be actually kind of interesting. They do nothing with that premise. This is nothing more than an aliens take over the world, and there's this small little resistance group that come to stop them. And it never really rises above that. For all that I could even understand what the aliens were like and what they wanted and what they were doing here, it's just not that interesting. The aliens are not all that diverse. They're not particularly well imagined. They're very, very generic. And that's just the aliens. The human characters in this movie are... every single one of them is the same person. I mean, it's so terrible. You have 3 male leading roles in this film, and I could not tell you which was which to save my life. They're exactly the same character, and the casting was terrible too, because they all had exactly the same height and build. And so when one character was saying one thing and another character was saying another, and those motivations come back into play later, I couldn't remember which one said what or which one wanted what. It was just terrible. So before I even go into the details of the plot, which there are not very many details, you can probably tell that this is your standard bad film. There are a lot of character problems, a lot of story problems. I'm very surprised that the person who wrote this screenplay was the same person who wrote Gattaca, because Gattaca was very well structured. The structure problems of this film are just amazing. We start out with this alien taking over this girl's body, but the girl isn't entirely subdued and she's still in there. Then we get flashbacks of that girl's life before she was taken over by the alien, but we only get like 1 or 2 of these, and it's so fast and it's so without context that they're just showing us random parts of this girl's life, and then we never get flashbacks anymore. So not only was that not enough to let us know who this girl was before she was taken over by the alien, but it just wasn't consistent. It didn't develop that character at all. The structure of this film was very strange and very abrupt and just not very well done. Then we have the aliens themselves, which could have been interesting if they went anywhere with them or they distinguished them from the humans in any way, because there is this concept where the aliens are actually supposed to be very nice. They don't want to hurt us. They don't want us hurting ourselves. I took this film to mean that that's why they took us over, because they saw that we were destroying our planet and blah, 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 and they had to come and save us. I'm not sure how that's saving us if they're actually literally taking us over, but I don't know. The premise was kind of there, but the aliens, very generic, not very interesting at all. And I would love to complain about the plot, but there really isn't one with regard to the people we're supposed to regard as the good guys and the people we're supposed to regard as the enemies. There is a lot of sitting around in this film. I mean, in just standing around and talking about external things, but little to no character development. The only character that was really distinguishing herself was the character Melanie, who was taken over by the alien, whom we later come to know as Wanda. Unfortunately, and this might just be my own personal opinion, I didn't like the character Melanie at all. I actually very deeply disliked her. This character, I thought she was very jealous and petty. She spends most of this film either hitting people or telling the alien, who I suppose is supposed to be kind of sort of an enemy, that they should let this one particular person die. Not to give too much away, but I didn't feel that the Melanie character was doing anything particularly good, and I was never given a reason to care. I certainly wasn't given a reason to care about any of the generic characters in this Resistance, and I didn't care about the aliens. The film was just very hollow and very empty, very half-baked. This is a film that is getting a very negative reception, and unlike the Twilight series, which I have said in the past, I think the negative reception is if not unwarranted, then overblown. I think the negative reception of this film is very deserved. So that's about all I can say about this one. This is turning out to be a very general review because not only did not a whole hell of a lot of people even care what I thought about this, or probably weren't even thinking about it themselves because not many people are watching this film, but it just left me cold. Honestly, it didn't even bring me up to the level of hate. It just made me really want the movie to be over so I didn't have to think about it anymore. If anybody is listening to this review who hasn't seen the film, you probably weren't planning on seeing it anyway. If you want my recommendation is skip it. There are plenty of better things that you can do with that 2 hours than sitting through this. So there's my general review. This is once again one of those reviews that is made possible by people like you. My thanks to the people who have donated over the weeks. You're really making it easy for me to actually go out and see these films so that I can tell you what I think about it, even if, like this film, I didn't feel much. If you are so inclined, there is a donate button on the official site. Donations are always appreciated. Once again, these reviews could not be done without them. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. And I will see you all again the next time a movie is released that has some general interest. Hopefully, it will be better than this one.